Hello, I'm Ronnie Lee, and I'm making this video in support of the National Animal Rights March, which is taking place in London this coming Saturday, starting at 12 noon at Marble Arch. Now, I've been a vegan 50 years this year, and also an animal liberationist for the same length of time. Now, my early days in the animal liberation movement consisted very much of direct action. I was one of the founders of the Animal Liberation Front, and ended up serving 3 prison sentences for animal liberation activity, and was proud to be part of a movement, a direct action movement, which spared many millions of animals from suffering and slaughter. Now, it was great to be involved in those things, but in recent years I've come to the conclusion that if we are to really achieve widespread animal liberation, we're not going to do that unless we educate a large number of people to become vegan. And that is obviously to do with the impact those people can make as consumers. It's interesting to note that the well-known environmentalist George Monbiot has said that just about the most important thing anyone can do to combat the climate and the ecological crisis we're facing on this planet at the moment is to adopt a vegan diet. So that's something that's really important that people can do as individuals. But the other thing about educating people to become vegan is that it creates system change. There's often said to be a kind of conflict between those campaigning for individual change and those campaigning for system change. But the fact is that individual change can create system change, because the people that we educate to become vegan aren't just consumers, but they're also voters. And if we can educate enough people to become vegan, then we'll get far more vegan politicians and far more vegans to vote for them, and eventually we can have a government in this country that will bring in widespread animal protection measures, that will abolish hunting properly, that will end animal experiments, that will end the fur trade and all other areas of the oppression of other animals. We'll take strong measures to combat the climate crisis, because the climate crisis is one of the major areas in which other animals are oppressed. However bad it is for humans, it is far worse for the other animals we share this planet with. And already we have billions of wild animals being wiped out because of global heating. And so that's why why vegan education, I believe, is fundamental to the process of creating system change. For decades and decades, as far as I can remember, we had governments that are opposed to the principle of animal liberation. Their ideologies have been exactly opposite to what we believe in. We need to change that. We need to be the people who are in control. Otherwise, people who believe the opposite of us will be the ones in control. It's either one way or the other, and we have to take measures to be the ones that run the show. And a very important way of doing that is to educate as many people as possible to become vegan. Now, what has the Animal Rights March got to do with that? Well, a great deal. Because animal rights marches I've been on in the past, I have regarded as excellent outreach events. I've been on many different marches in London. I've been on marches against austerity. I went on a couple of marches against Donald Trump when he was invited over here to visit this country. And for various other causes. But I've often felt that those marches were very much a waste of time, They had no impact whatsoever on the government. And it was basically just people on those marches giving leaflets to one another. But I've always regarded the Animal Rights March, or certainly the various national animal rights marches I've been on, as different to that. Because although I feel that those marches have really no chance of influencing the government, they're not going to influence a government that is opposed to animal liberation, ideologically. But what they can do and what they have done, it has been a great way of spreading the vegan message, with great banners and placards that members of the public see along the route, and hundreds, if not thousands, of leaflets distributed to members of the public to educate them to go vegan. So that's how I see the Animal Rights March, as a brilliant outreach event. And that's why I'd say to everyone, certainly in England, or certainly if you can get to London, if you can get along to the Animal Rights March next Saturday, that would be great. But also, as well as going along, think how you can spread the vegan message while you're there. A very important way of doing that is take along some leaflets, take along some vegan leaflets, if you can get hold of them, and give them out to members of the public along the route of the march. If you can't do that, knock up a great placard encouraging people to go vegan. And that will be part of this brilliant outreach effort that the Animal Rights March can be. And the other thing to remember, of course, and really this is a message not just to people here in England, but to people throughout the world, and who many of whom won't be able to get along to the Animal Rights March in London on Saturday. What I'd say to everyone is these big events like the march are great, but that's just one day a year. And what I have to remember is that every second of every day of every year, at least 50,000 animals are slaughtered by the food industry. And if we take into account the other animals that are killed by humans for other reasons, hunting, animal experimentation, fur trade, etc., and the number that perish through adverse human impact on the environment, such as the climate crisis, pollution, our forms of transportation, all those things, then that number could easily be 100,000 a second. This is horrendous. This is horrendous death toll imposed on the other creatures that share this planet with us. And we have to urgently do something to stop that. And that's why vegan education is once again so important. And one day of the year isn't enough to do that. And what I'd say to everyone listening is think about what you can do where you live. It's great to go on these big events to all gather together, give each other encouragement and inspiration. But we need to carry on the struggle when we get back home. And I'd say to everyone, whether they're going on the march on Saturday or not going on the march, to think about what you can do to carry out, to organise and to stimulate vegan outreach in your own area. Because we need outreach in every city, not just the big cities, but in smaller cities as well, and not just in the centres of cities, but in the suburbs. We need it in every town and even every village, right down at grassroots level, educating people as often as possible and as much as possible. And that is something that every vegan can do. It's not difficult. It doesn't demand anything complicated. It doesn't demand getting arrested, although I'm in total solidarity with those activists that are prepared to get arrested in furtherance of our struggle. But for those who aren't able to, those who can only do simple things, there's lots of outreach you can carry out. Just as simple as door dropping leaflets, setting up an information stall, something like that. So I'd appeal to everyone listening to this, especially to all vegans listening to this, because the first thing that it's important for people to do is to change themselves before changing others. And what I'd say to you all is think about how you can spread the vegan message as often as possible, and how you can organise outreach, whether it's just doing it yourself or with other people in the areas where you live. Because if this march on Saturday can inspire that, and I hope it will, and we can get enough vegan education in enough places, often enough, I believe that we can achieve animal liberation.